Short story by Paul McCann entitled Till Death Do Us Part. Long after midnight, shadows began to run across the grounds at Barnstone Manor, and trees started to sway against the might of a wind that wildly began to throw its voice, shattering the silence of the night. Some of the upstairs window shutters began to bang back and forth outside of the windows at Barnstone Manor. Inside the home, a weak voice kept calling out from one of the bedrooms at the end of the corridor.
"Winifred, can you hear me? Are you there, Winifred?"
She lifted the bell hanging from the bed headpost and shook it furiously as she continued to call out.
"Winifred, hurry up, where are you?"
Winifred jumped out of her bed and rushed to her mother's bedroom at the end of the corridor. She went into her mother's room out of breath and said,
"For heaven's sake, what's the matter?" "What's the matter? Can't you hear the racket out there?"
she replied.
"It's just the wind, Mother, and I can't stop it blowing,"
said Winifred.
"But I can't sleep. It's the shutters. They keep banging for hours. I've been lying here and listening to it,"
said Ruth. Winifred took a deep breath and sat down near her mother's bed. She opened the window and tried to close the shutters, but the catches on the inside were damaged and would not close properly.
"Damn stupid catches," said Winifred. "What are you talking about?"
"There's no need to worry, Mother. Try and get back to sleep. I'll get Ted to fix all the shutter catches in the morning."
"But Ted's just a gardener, and a bad one at that. He couldn't hammer a nail in the wall, never mind fix a shutter."
"Well, then I'll ring a tradesman, so just try and rest, Mother."
"So, how am I supposed to sleep with all that banging? I can't sleep, I can't rest, and I can feel my blood pressure rising. Ring the doctor for me. He said I must get plenty of rest and lots of peace and quiet," said Ruth. "I can't ring the doctor at this time. It's after 3 a.m, Winifred said.
Ruth pretended to cry and said,
"If I have a stroke and die, it's all your fault."
Winifred looked at her mother for a moment and replied, "All right, Mother. I'll go make a nice cup of tea and sit with you until the morning comes."
"All right, then. Can you bring me some of those crispy cookies you baked earlier today, and let's have a look at that old photos. The album we had a look at last night?"
When Winifred returned with the tray, her mother was sitting there in her nightgown like a queen of the realm. She pointed to the coffee table in front of her and said,
"Just set the tea there now. Where are those photo albums, dear?"
"Right where we had them last night, over there on top of the dresser."
"Well, bring them over and let's have a look. I can't waste any more time. After all, you'll be married in a few weeks, and we won't be able to spend much more time together," said Ruth.
"Now, you know that's not true, Mother. Michael and I will be living here with you. We've already discussed all that."
"Well, maybe so, but a lot can happen in 3 weeks. You might change your mind and move away after your wedding day," said Ruth.
Winifred groaned and said, "Oh, Mother, stop being difficult. I'll always be here to look after you, and Michael knows that, and you should know that too." She went over and lifted a photo album. When she returned, she sat beside her mother in the other armchair and started to flick through the pages.
"Have you decided on a photographer yet for the wedding?"
"Oh, yes. I remember that old photo, Mum. Look, it's me playing tennis one afternoon with Ted. Do you remember that day, Mother, when he was cutting back the hedge and I had no one to have a hit with?"
"Oh, don't talk, Ruth. You could never trim a hedge, never mind get a ball over the net," said Ruth.
"You never liked him. I don't know why you still keep him on here."
"Well, I feel sorry for him. He would never get a job anywhere else, and no one has ever married him. Anyway, what about the wedding photographer?"
Well, during the week, a young lady called Joan rang. She seems friendly, and her hourly rates are pretty good."
"What about the catering and the flowers?"
I'm going to hire a French chef called Patrice. He will bring his own staff, and the quote I was given is good. Michael is sorting the flowers and the cars and all the rest, so we're nearly there.
Good. I asked Mr. Greaves, the bank manager, to call in this week.
Why, is there a problem?
Well, yes. Some of my accounts have me confused. There have been some large transactions that I can't remember making, and some of my money has been transferred, and I don't know where or why.
Why didn't you speak to me sooner? Can I have a look at some of your bank statements, Mother?
Oh, don't bother. You've enough to worry about, Winifred.
But you know I once was a banker, so let me help, said Ruth.
Well, all right. All my statements are in a blue folder inside the roll-top desk in the parlour.
Okay. I'll have a look later or tomorrow, Winifred said.
I don't know what I'd do without you, my dear. I know sometimes I ask a lot of you, Winnie. Often I wished you had a brother or a sister, but it just wasn't to be.
Mother, Michael and I were talking last week about what would happen if one or both of us had an accident or something. He has a friend who works for an insurance company, and we decided to take out a life insurance policy together. It covers one or both of us in case of an accident or tragedy.
That's a wise move, dear, said Ruth.
Is Peter coming to change your wound dressings? Ruth replied.
Yes, at 7. I wish you wouldn't, though. She's got hands like a coal miner, and they're always cold and dirty. And she smells of nicotine. And all she ever does is cough when she's here.
Do you want me to speak to the nursing service and get you someone else? Said Winifred.
Oh, better not. I've found in the past when you complain they send you someone even worse. Just let it go. My wounds are improving, and in a week or two, Peter won't be required to come any longer, Ruth replied.
She has been very nice to you, though, Mother, bringing you little bunches of flowers, and she walks around the garden with you after breakfast, said Winifred. Ruth replied,
Well, I suppose she tries, but she's not a qualified nurse, you know. I told her about my time as a nurse during the war. She had no idea what it was like for nurses back then.
Winifred turned over a page of the photo album. Look, Mother, here's a photo of you and Dad in the War Memorial Hospital after the war. Oh, I meant to tell you, the marriage celebrant is coming tomorrow evening for a brief run-through of all the vows and a selection of the hymns. I suppose he wants to come for tea, and he'll probably stay late. I hope not, Mother. Michael and I aren't really that impressed with her. All she ever seems to talk about is the growing number of divorces and how and why marriages break down. Ruth replied,
You don't need that. Get another minister. There must be someone else who can do the job.
Well, it's not that easy. See, Michael was married before, and some ministers have said that they would not perform the service for us. So when Tony said she would marry us, we grabbed her. Ruth replied,
Stone of crows, it's nearly 7 already. Peter will be here soon. Oh, I better get ready, I suppose.
And off she went, down the stairs to make breakfast. Someone rang the doorbell.
Oh, good morning. I'm coming.
Winifred made her way down the staircase and opened up the front door. Good morning, Win. Oh, Ted. Hello. Is everything okay? Actually, could I have a quick word with your mother? Can I help? Asked Winifred. Well, last week, Ruth asked me to pick up a special little something for her. Oh. He held a package that was wrapped in pretty paper and continued, It's for the wedding, and I can't tell you what's inside. Not a word. I need to give it to her in person.
Oh, well, I guess I better let you go up then. She's in her bedroom. Just knock before you go in.
Be quick, though. Peter's coming soon to clean her wounds and change the dressings. Okay. I won't be long. By the time Ted was finished, Peter came to the front door. They met each other briefly, eye to eye. Peter said, "Good morning. Good day for pruning the roses, eh, Ted?" "Oh, I wish, Peter, but I have more important things to be doing than the roses. Did you hear the wind last night? The trees, the fences are falling down all over the place today. So, how's your duties going this morning?" Peter sighed a breath in despair, and then she said, "Don't start me talking. I've had 3 clients who've had falls during the night. 2 of them have broken their hip, and the other had a stroke. I found her on the bedroom floor this morning. She's just been taken to hospital, and it doesn't look good." "Well, it's good someone's there to find them, Peter. I must go. See you. Have a good day." By the time Winifred had breakfast ready, Peter took Winifred arm by arm slowly down the staircase, and they all sat together and enjoyed some cereal and then tea and toast before Winifred went into the parlour to check out the bank statements. Just as Peter walked outside with Ruth, Mr. Greaves pulled up in his car at the front. Ruth took a long breath of relief, and then she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Peter. I forgot to tell you. I have an appointment this morning, so you may as well go early today. See you again tomorrow morning, then." Okay, Mrs. Barnstone, I'll see you tomorrow, thank you." Peter made her way to her car as Mr. Greaves came to the front door. "Oh, good morning, Mr. Barnstone. Nice to see you again. Now, what did you want to see me about?" He looked awkward and spoke with a nervous edge to his voice. "Oh, come inside and have some tea. Wasn't it a wild night?" "Gale force 5, they said." "It's hard to ride a bike on a stormy night." "Close the door behind you, Mrs. Greaves." "My mother loved riding bikes, Mrs. Barnstone, and it's Mr. Greaves." "Oh, yes, of course it is, of course." They made their way first to the parlour, where Ruth knocked upon the door and said, "Winifred, Mr. Greaves is here. Could you bring us a drop of tea to the sunroom?" "Yes, indeed, Mother. I'll be there shortly." She noticed Mr. Greaves look uneasy and fidgeted as he sat at the table in the sunroom. She looked into his eyes and said, "It's always much clearer in the morning, don't you think so, Mr. Greaves?" Well, I never thought about that. I did notice a lot of damage this morning to the rooftops around the village. Some of homes even lost their electricity supply during the night. And power lines have come down all over the place," Mr. Greaves replied. She said, "Oh, well, I wouldn't know about that. You see, I have a few different energy sources, as well as a wind-assisted turbine. I have solar and gas supply." You do have a nice setup here at Barnstone Manor," he replied. Winifred, "My daughter? Well, she planned it all, you know. She's a very clever girl." Then Winifred arrived with a tray, and on it a teapot and a cover, with a milk jug, a sugar bowl, 2 cups and saucers, and 2 buttered scones with jam and cream. Then, as she placed the tray before them on the table, she said, "Well, good morning, Mr. Greaves. Isn't it amazing the things that are left when a storm has been through? It's been like Murphy's house here this morning. Here you are, some tea and scones." "Aren't you going to join us?" Mr. Greaves asked as he lifted the teapot and started to pour. "Oh, not just yet. I'm doing a few calculations and making some inquiries on the phone. Did I ever tell you I was a banker, Mr. Greaves?" It was noticeable he started shaking, and he put the teapot down. Then he started coughing. Ruth patted him between the shoulder blades and said, "Are you okay, Mr. Greaves?" "Yes, it's just a bit of bronchitis. Too many hours behind a desk. Not enough fresh air, I think." Suddenly there was a loud knock on the door, and in walked Michael. Winifred rushed to greet him with a kiss and said, "Oh, my darling, hello. How are things at the office?" Just thought I'd take an escape for a while. A special moment every day with my future wife is a glimpse of the happiness that is to come for us both."
"Remember, we have a meeting with the marriage celebrant at 7, Winifred said.
"Oh no, do we really have to go through all that again?"
This is the last one before the big day. Have you had morning tea yet?"
"Oh, I have, my love. Can we just have a walk outside around the garden? I just want to breathe with you and talk with you, just for a half hour." Winifred turned around to Mr. Greaves and her mother and said,
"Please excuse us, but as you see, I've got a date."
The two sweethearts had been out in the garden for a while, but soon after, Winifred came rushing in, followed by Michael. She was crying.
"Whatever happened?"
said Ruth. Winifred tried to compose herself as Michael stormed out the door. She sat down beside her mother and said,
"Everything was going just fine, and then I told Michael about the photographer. As it turns out, Joan is the sister of his ex-wife, and now Michael doesn't want her to take the photos, but I've already paid and signed a contract for her to do the job."
Ruth replied,
"Oh, don't worry, dear. I'm sure things will settle down. There are always little things to test you before and after you get married. Mr. Greaves, can you please come back later in the week? I think my daughter and I need some space this morning."
he replied.
"No problem, Mrs. Barnstone. I'll speak with you later then."
He anxiously got to his feet and headed for the door. It wasn't long before Michael returned, and he walked straight over to Winifred and put his arms around her and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, my angel, for hurting you, and I never meant any of the things that I said. The relationship with my ex-wife and her family is over. They are no longer part of my life, so I want you to know that I'm very happy with the choice you made to have Joan as the photographer on our wedding day."
"Really? Really, darling? Oh, thank you. It means so much to me."
"Listen, my love, I'm taking the rest of the day off. How about we go for a drive and have lunch by the sea?"
"That would be great.
I just have to organise someone from the nursing service to be here with Mother while we're out. Give me a minute or two to make a phone call." Soon Peter returned to Barnstone Manor, and Michael and Winifred went to have lunch. Not long after they had gone, Ted walked up from the garden with a wheelbarrow. He had seen Michael and Winifred drive off in the car and wondered who was in the house. He knocked on the door, but no one answered. He waited and knocked again. The third time, when no one came to open the door, he went inside. There at the foot of the staircase he found Ruth. She lay there motionless. Ted checked for a pulse, then noticed she wasn't breathing. He went into the parlour and rang the emergency phone number. When he returned from the parlour, he saw Peter kneeling there on the floor beside Ruth. She tried in vain to give some breath and to restore a heartbeat into Ruth's body. But the fact was Ruth was dead, and nothing could be done. She could not be revived. She looked in tears and said to Ted,
"I just had to go to the bathroom just for a few minutes. I couldn't help. She was standing on the top of the stairs. I told her to wait there, and when I came back, I found her at the bottom."
Don't worry. I'm gonna. The police will be here soon, and the ambulance. So just take a seat and try and relax, Peter. We'll get all this sorted out very soon. The ambulance arrived and then the police. At first it was assumed that she had fallen down the stairs and broken her neck. But after a while, on further examination, and due to coloration of the lips and the face, it was now clear that Ruth had died from being poisoned. So a crime scene was established and people were now being questioned. When Winifred and Michael returned, they were greeted by the police with the terrible news of the tragedy that had taken place. An old detective by the name of Gregory Williams was put in charge of the case, and he started his investigations, unobtrusively speaking to everyone who had been in the home on the morning of Ruth Barnstone's death. When Ruth was buried in the grave that held her husband, people had said how sad it was that Ruth wasn't going to be there for her daughter's wedding. Although Winifred was deeply in shock, plans were made and the life had to go on. There was no postponing the wedding day. Winifred and Michael had decided they were going to restore some love and happiness back to Barnstone Manor. They had worked very hard to decorate and renovate the main hall where the reception would take place. The garden where the ceremony was to take place had been transformed into a setting with an archway of colourful flowers that led to a platform where some seats were placed before a gazebo. Joan took plenty of photographs of the family and friends who were now gathering for this wonderful occasion. Michael was really agitated because of Joan, the sister of his ex-wife, who walked around with a camera, enviously looking at him whenever she was passing him by. He almost said something to her, but declined, as he didn't want to ruin Winifred's big day. Behind the scenes, the investigations were continuing, and Detective Williams had asked Michael about how much wealth was left by Ruth to his wife-to-be. Michael was getting upset by what was insinuated. Patrice, the chef, was not very happy after he had been spoken to abruptly by Michael, who had noticed him drinking in the kitchen. Patrice would have walked away and really left the proceedings if it hadn't been for the intervention of Peter, the community nurse, who explained how important it was for Winifred and that the reception would have to be successful after what had happened. Detective Williams had asked Peter about a number of recent complaints made about the care that had been given to Ruth before her death. These complaints were made by Winifred and Ruth, but Peter said she was not aware of those complaints. Mr. Greaves was there and had presented a letter to Winifred before the wedding. She put it aside and said she would open it after the reception. Ted, the gardener, presented a little gift to Winifred that he had said Ruth had bought for her. That really upset Winifred, and she went to pieces just before the ceremony was about to start. Patrice the chef had prepared some special treats for the guests, and canvas food was being brought around before the ceremony started by waiters and waitresses. A few drinks were handed out to lighten the tone, as you could sense something just wasn't right. Soon, some wedding bells rang out to tell the guests it was time to take their seats. An organ that was sitting inside the gazebo started to play the wedding march as Winifred made her way to stand before Michael. Tony the celebrant welcomed everyone for the happy occasion. After the wedding, Winifred went to change into some comfortable clothes for the reception. Everyone made their way into the main hall where the reception was to be held. There were a number of small tables set with glasses and napkins. 6 name cards were placed on each table, and on the ceiling, white and black balloons were hanging with streamers. A band played on a small stage that was set up in the corner. Everyone took their seat waiting for the bride and groom. Seemed to be taking an awful long time for the bride and groom to make their appearance. Suddenly one of the kitchen staff came screaming, running out of the kitchen. Detective Williams rushed to investigate, and there he found Michael, the groom. He was found in the cool room hanging by the neck on a rope tied to a hook that was once used to suspend large sides of beef. And while all this was going on, Winifred's body had been found. She had been stabbed a few times with a knife and was dead in her mother's bedroom. And on her finger, the wedding ring was removed. And now the whole household was placed under arrest, and no one was permitted to leave. Detective Williams found the letter that had been presented to Winifred by Mr. Greaves. The letter was opened, and it was discovered that a huge sum of money was enclosed. After interrogation and a search of his home, some blackmail letters were discovered. They were sent by Winifred to Mr. Greaves, stating that she had proof that he was withdrawing money from her mother's account, and traced a number of large deposits made by him into offshore accounts in a business name that had separated him from the transactions. On further investigation, it showed that Mr. Greaves had been paying Winifred regular installments to stop her revealing the well-guarded secret money that had been siphoned out from many different accounts without the customer's permission or knowledge. Mr. Greaves had a motive for the murder of Winifred, and now Detective Williams was looking at the opportunity and where he was when the bodies were found. When Ruth was found poisoned in her home, Mr. Greaves had visited her that morning in her home. Mr. Greaves had admitted that he did have the opportunity to poison her, but that he wasn't a killer, and that he was, at that time, being blackmailed by Winifred. It was stated that Mr. Greaves also did have the opportunity to murder Michael, and the motive was that Winifred could have told her husband to be about the money-moving business that had been going on with the not-so-honest bank manager. Mr. Greaves was arrested and charged with the murders of Ruth, Winifred and Michael, and was to stand trial for the accusations. After the arrest was made and he was taken away, all the other guests were allowed to leave Barnstone Manor. Detective Williams was walking around the grounds, checking out some of the damage from the winds the previous night. He spotted Ted. He asked Ted if he could have a look at the place where he lived. He asked Ted if he had keys to lock up the home, because no one was there and all the sheds and buildings needed to be locked up. Ted said he'd do that as soon as everyone was gone. Detective Williams asked Ted if he lived nearby. Ted explained that he'd been given a small caretaker's cottage on the property. When Detective Williams asked if he could have a look at it, Ted got very agitated and said, What's the problem? Haven't you already got the murderer? Am I a suspect or something? Anyway, you don't have a search warrant, so come back when you have one. Ted was in such a hurry when he walked away to his cottage that he tripped over a small branch limb that lay on the ground and fell down, and a bunch of keys fell out of his pockets, but Ted never felt them and got to his feet and ran off. Detective Williams picked the keys up and checked each one. There were 10 keys, but the one in the middle intrigued him. It was very old, cut on both edges. And because it was in the middle of the key ring, obviously it had been there for a while. He suspected it could be a key to the door. And when he made his way to the front door of Barnstone Manor and placed it in the keyhole, it opened the door of the main house. In previous investigations, there was one point that didn't seem to be clear. On the day Ruth was killed, Peter had said that she locked the front door when Michael and Winifred left in the car. And yet Ted stated the door was open when he came. On Ted's key ring, the front door key to the manor was right in the middle, which told the detective something. So he made his way to have a look around the manor, and on the dresser in Ruth's bedroom he spotted some photo albums. As he went through each page, he saw many photos of Ted and Winifred. Then something began to click and make sense. He started to look around Winifred's room, and in some of the tins in the wardrobe he found there were items of jewellery with the inscription, "To win my only love, forever yours, Ted." Other things became evident. There were letters that he had found that were written from Ted to Winifred. Times and dates for dinner dates at the cottage. Now with this new evidence, Detective Williams had a new motive to work with. Jealousy and hatred for being jilted as Winifred's ex-lover. And immediately he went to get a warrant to search the caretaker's cottage. When Detective Williams arrived with the police at the cottage, he noticed Ted furiously, frantically running around looking for something. "Are these what you're looking for? I found these on the ground, Ted." "You must have dropped them, when you fell." Ted rushed over and grabbed the keys, and as he did, Detective Williams produced the search warrant. Once inside the cottage, the police found photos of Winifred. They were hung everywhere. The ceiling, the walls, bits of furniture. There were photos too of Michael that were found in the fridge freezer, with safety pins pushed through his head. There were also photos of Ted and Winifred together, holding hands, kissing, dancing. Other letters were discovered from Ruth that offered Ted some money and a home to live in if he would not bother Winifred anymore. Some other letters from Winifred were found that stated she didn't love him and that she had met a man called Michael. Then they found Ted's diary. Some of the notes in the diary described in detail how he was going to destroy the 3 people who had destroyed him. The poison that was used to kill Ruth was found in the greenhouse beside the cottage. Rope, similar to the one used to hang Michael in the cool room, was found in the tractor shed. And the knife that killed Winifred was a hunting knife, and part of a set of knives that was found inside the cottage where Ted lived. Ted was charged and convicted with the 3 murders, sent down for life in prison with no possibility of parole. Due to the face that was embedded in Mr. Greaves' memory, he also had to face court too. He lost his job. He spent some years in prison for fraud, and he had to repay all the monies that he took once he was released from prison. He took up a new job selling flowers on street corners and lived a quiet existence. And Barnstone Manor was sold, and because there were no descendants to the property, all the money was placed into a government slush fund that provided compensation payments for victims of crime. The end.
We